Missed an episode of your favorite podcast? Choose from over a decade of content in our archives, not just the latest episode. All free at GCNlive.com.
This is your call to action. Get prepared, America. Economy, survival, energy, disasters. This is USAPrepares.com. Informative radio, educational radio. Interact now by emailing instructor@USAPrepares.com or text at 434-390-7953. Class, please take your seats. Now, your instructor, Vincent Finelli.
Everyone all set? Cocked? Locked? Here we go. Your dial is set to USAPrepares.com. Kyle's engineering the broadcast in Minnesota. If you'd like to call us, 866-582-9933. 866-582-9933. Gwyneth Isaacs is with us. Welcome, Gwyneth.
Hello, Vincent. How are you this morning?
I am well. The sun is shining. It's dark where you are, right? Yeah.
Yes, it's just after 2 a.m. in the morning.
Yep. Yeah. Wow. Hey, thanks for being with us. And yeah. Well, thank you for spending this time with us today. Cryptocurrencies. We'll be talking about that. Now, you've been mining cryptocurrencies, and so this is going to be a do-it-yourself kind of class, and we'll be teaching the mechanics of mining your own cryptocurrencies. Where would you like to start today?
Okay. Now, the cryptocurrency that I'm mining at the moment is Bitcoin. Now, I think I've actually gone into how Bitcoin mining actually operates on your show before, but I'll just quickly review that. There's a game out there. It's a children's computer game called Minecraft, and mathematically, how Bitcoin mining more or less operates is, if you could imagine that you're playing Minecraft, which is a game where your guy has to break open blocks, and every so many blocks, then he might get an emerald or a lump of coal or a diamond or something or other. And and in this game you can also build stuff, but that's beside the point. Let's say that in the game you're in an area rich in emeralds, let's say in Minecraft, then you might have an emerald in the game every 100 blocks. Then you've got to break open 100 blocks to get an emerald. Okay? That's more or less how, mathematically, Bitcoin mining operates. That you've got to go through a set of equations, and every so many sequences of the equation, there is a block of Bitcoin. And it varies how many Bitcoin are actually in the block. It could be up to 5. It could be 1 or 2 or 3, just depending on the equation. And so you have to have generally quite a fast computer these days in order to do the equations quickly enough, because in the beginning you might have had a Bitcoin every few equations. Oh, pardon me, I'm just yawning here. These days, it could be 1 in every, several million equations these days. And so if you're running your own computer at home, waiting for Bitcoin, and if you've just got one one computer running one piece of mining software, you could be waiting a month or two for it to hit 1 Bitcoin. So usually these days, that's why there still are people out there who run their own computers, mining Bitcoin, but more frequently these days, you've got special Bitcoin mining farms, which means that you might have several hundred or several thousand computers running in parallel, looking to solve the equation, okay? And in that case, normally, instead of it being a full desktop computer or even a laptop computer, of course you can put the mining software on a full desktop computer, or you can put the mining software on a laptop computer. But more common than either of those these days is a type of computer called a Raspberry Pi. And the difference with a Raspberry Pi is instead of it having a really good graphics card, a really good sound card, and such like, it will have a really, really, really good central processing unit, and you might be able to access the computer via a green screen, and it'll have somewhere to plug in a keyboard, and it'll have some USB ports, and it doesn't really have that much else other than that. Its main function in life is to solve equations. And so very frequently these days, for a lot of technical purposes, people are using Raspberry Pis, and this includes, for Bitcoin mining. And you could buy a Raspberry Pi type computer online for maybe between $500 and $800 that would do the job of Bitcoin mining. But like I say, most people who have their own Bitcoin mines don't just have one or two, they have dozens or they have hundreds of them. And the people who do this sort of mining, they generally accumulate their computers, okay? So that they will use the proceeds from their Bitcoin that they have mined to then go out and buy more computers. And yeah, that's more or less how people these days are building their Bitcoin mines. So that's more or less how it operates.
Mm-hmm. I'm looking at a Raspberry Pi Model 3, and it says you can get a complete kit for a VIA boot, VIABOOT, Raspberry Pi, spelled P-I, followed by the number 3, complete kit with a premium clear case. It's like a clear box that this circuit board is in. It's got a couple USB ports, as you said. It's got a heat sink. It's got a processor, a little tiny wall-type plug-in power supply, $59.99. But that's
that
you have to do a little bit of work. Yes. Yep.
Yeah, you got to have the technical know-how to be able to put it together.
Right. That's exactly right. And there's a little bit more to this. As I understand, someone who wants to mine Bitcoins needs to have a rock-solid power supply. Rock solid, meaning
you do.
If you live in
I should have mentioned
if you live
that.
in an area, well, you did the last time. If you live in an area where the power is a little flaky, you have brownouts, meaning the lights go dim, or the lights flicker, you're going to need something substantial to make sure that doesn't happen, like an uninterruptible power supply. And let me share with the class what that is. An uninterruptible power supply is a box that has a battery. It also has an inverter. It also has a charger, and also has some circuitry to look at the power grid, meaning your wall outlet. And it looks at it and says, do we have power? Do we have power? Do we have power? Do we have power? And it keeps looking. And if it says, oops, don't have any power, it immediately switches the inverter to the inverter so that the power is not interrupted to the outlet on the back of this uninterruptible power supply. And how long will it last? Well, until the battery is drained on the uninterruptible power supply. Typically 20 minutes. Now, with this little Raspberry Pi, I don't know the power consumption. I haven't read that. But you can get large, medium, and small-sized uninterruptible power supplies. And what I did in the studio several years ago, I wanted to make sure that we were uninterrupted should the power fail here in our neck of the woods in Missouri. So I bought a used American Power Conversion UPS, uninterruptible power supply, that had a dead battery. And the guy said he was selling it because it needed a new battery. So it was a 24-volt system. So I simply hooked that up with large monster-type cables, almost look like battery jumper cables. Well, actually they were. Heavy gauge copper cables to this uninterruptible power supply, and I made my own long-lasting, long-running uninterruptible power supply. My plan was to get all of the computers that I'm running for the broadcast to be powered up should we have a complete blackout. And I achieved that. And I used two large marine-type batteries that I got at the Chinese factory outlet, Walmart. And that was really good until the batteries exploded, literally, in the studio. I happened to not be in the studio, but literally, the cases exploded. Acid went all over. I'm not talking about a couple drops of acid. I'm talking about vaporizing the liquid acid in the uninterruptible power supply. So I don't do that anymore. It happened twice. I don't do that. I'm a slow learner. I did it twice. So I don't do that anymore. But the bottom line is you do not want the power to fail with a Bitcoin mining computer. That's the point. Okay, we'll be right back. We're going to be talking more about the mechanics with Gwyneth Isaacs. She's live in Australia. I'm Vincent Finelli. Gwyneth Isaacs with us, and we're talking about mining Bitcoins. So, Gwyneth, I went to the search engine during the commercials, and I'm looking at this guy's room, and he has a stack of 12 Bitcoin computers, all stacked up in a vertical array. And next to that, he has 3 more. So he's got 48 computers hooked up to a huge uninterruptible power supply. And that's what he's mining his Bitcoins with. So it's quite an array of these. And so if you want to do this class, you can, and I see some others that it's just a rat's nest of wires. I mean, hundreds and hundreds of wires all over the floor, hooked up to electrical devices, computers, power supplies, switches, and so forth. And it looks like you can make your own. So, Gwyneth, have you considered building your own computer to do this?
We live off the grid, and the electricity goes off every single night here. So I can't do my Bitcoin mining on site.
Okay, so what do you do?
Okay, I operate my Bitcoin mine through a company, and one way that people, a lot of other people do it as well, is they either buy or lease computers run by a third party, and basically that they have a contract to use these computers for however many days. The length of the contract varies, but in my case, it's 1,000 days. And that I actually own the computers. The company that that runs the computers for me can ship them to me at the end of the 1,000 days. Okay, so once the contract is over and the computers are removed from their network, from their Bitcoin farm, then they can actually put them in a packet and actually mail them to me. Okay, for the cost of the postage, basically. And so that company is called BitClub, which is www.bitclub.network. But they don't operate within the United States. But if you're in the rest of the world, I think that they are currently mining with their facility. Their main facility is located in Reykjavik in Iceland, which has the advantage, number one, it's very, very, very cold there. Number two, it's a first world country, so you've got a high level of technical expertise. Number three, they don't like banksters very much in that country. And number four, the electrical supply is geothermal, and so the electricity there is both very, very cheap and super stable, which all makes it very, very good for Bitcoin mining. But like I say, unfortunately, they cannot offer services to anyone who is in the United States. But if you're in another country, you can go to www.bitclub.network/Gwyneth, that's GUINEITH, and I can sign you up. They run an affiliate program, okay? And so you can sign up under me, and that means that I would receive a small portion of the Bitcoin that you mine, so that I can actually operate their system. Instead of them doing advertising, they operate on a direct marketing model in order to sell their services. Okay. And the affiliate who got me into the program was the Dollar Vigilante, Jeff Berwick. So this is our system. It was thoroughly checked out by him, and he's a really, really good guy. If you ever wanted to have him on his show, I don't know him personally, unfortunately. I wish I did.
Right. Hold that thought. We'll be right back. So, Gwyneth, I'm still looking at these images of these Bitcoin mining server or computer farms, and they go from like they start. You can have 1 or 2 or 5 or 10 to. I found one that has 405 computers. That was nothing. I kept looking, and I am seeing like warehouse rooms, really spotless warehouse rooms with shelving and with thousands of these Bitcoin mining computers. You know, some of these operations are just rat's nests. Some are kind of like do-it-yourselfers, where they've taken Gorilla-type shelving. It's a brand of shelving that used to be available, really heavy-duty for the home, really good quality shelving, and you can put a lot of computers on there. And when I built a server farm for a county school system, that's what I did, and it was inexpensive and it worked great. Well, I see some of those type of images on the search engine image page. It's wow. I mean, this is phenomenal. I mean, class.
It's a big industry.
Huge. Some of these some of these Bitcoin mining operations are very, very elaborate, really sophisticated, beyond belief. But anyway, I just wanted to mention that. And by the way, Miles has been with us advocating that we do our own homework and research Bitcoin and cryptocurrencies, as have you, Gwyneth. And both of you have been on the forefront of this here on at USA Prepares. And Miles mentioned, and as you have, get Bitcoin. At the time he said it, it was $750 each, which I thought, gosh, for a concept, that's a lot of money to bet on a concept. Well, today, what is Bitcoin?
$8,000.
8,247.
It's broken 8,000 this morning.
Right. It's 8,200.
Gosh.
$8,247.25. Now, class, let me put this in perspective. When this was recommended to us
ago that it was $700.
Yes, it's
actually
11 times. 11 times. It has gone up 11 times what it was about a year ago. No kidding. And we have our detractors who say this is a concept and it's going to just blow up in our faces, and it might. This is something that you could consider risky because there is absolutely nothing backing it except the belief that it can be the currency to replace the fraud, the Federal Reserve Accounting Unit dollar, FRAUD. Would you agree with that, Gwyneth?
I absolutely would agree with it. The Federal Reserve notes, which back pretty well every major currency in the world, are inherently fraudulent, okay? They're based on the goodwill of the U.S. government, basically, the faith and goodwill of the U.S. government. Mm-hmm. And the whole U.S. government, Donald Trump is doing the best that he can to shore up a rickety, termite-eaten, fungus-infested structure that is just about ready to fall over in the next big breeze, which is the United States government. And when it collapses, I think that it's a little bit less likely to collapse now than it would have been if the high black witch Hillary had gotten in. But it's still there's still a lot of corruption in there, and even the whole structure itself is inherently corrupt. The difference with Bitcoin is, what makes gold valuable, physical gold and physical silver valuable, is that they are rare and you actually have to work to get them, And if you go up to the Yukon or here in Bendigo, which is about 80 kilometres from where we live, there's one of the biggest mines in the world, one of the deepest mines in the world, which is a Central Deborah gold mine. And it's miles and miles and miles and miles deep. And you've got a tower above Central Deborah mine, which is over 100 years old and is hugely famous locally. And somebody had to build that tower to operate the lift system over 100 years ago so that the Central Deborah mine could run, which is a gold mine. And, it was made famous by Stan Deyo because Edward Teller once offered to give Stan Deyo an office at the bottom of the Central Deborah mine, which would not have gone well for Stan Deyo, and Stan Deyo very wisely decided to flee across the Nullarbor from Edward Teller. Edward Teller was in charge of the Manhattan Project, by the way. And I remember hearing him saying that and, realizing that I actually knew this place. But that's what makes gold valuable. And the fact that you have to actually put capital into Bitcoin and that you actually have to run software to get the code, which is a Bitcoin, and that you have to use electricity, and that you have to have skills to actually get it, makes it valuable. Okay? So you can't just go into your Federal Reserve computer and type a few extra zeros onto the end of, whatever figure that you've pulled up. Or you can't go to a bank computer, central mainframe, and just create Bitcoin out of thin air. That's what actually gives it its value. And the Federal Reserve note is going to collapse. It has lost in the ballpark of 99% of its value, which I think we've gone into the calculations of that before, since it was first created, and it's going away. But it won't go away overnight. It would be sensible, though, to use whatever fiat currency you have to buy some mining software and some mining hardware, whether you run it at home yourself or whether you subcontract somebody else to run it for you, and get some Bitcoin mining happening. Because actually, in my humble opinion, and this is not financial advice, I'm not a financial advisor, but my own opinion is that Bitcoin is not going anywhere. And there's also other cryptocurrencies as well. At the top of the list, I would put Ethereum, which operates a kind of digital contract system. And it is now becoming increasingly the way that digital contracts operate over the internet. And that's another type of cryptocurrency mining. And Ethereum is now where Bitcoin was maybe 5 years ago. So I think that one Ether coin now costs around about between $200 and $300. So it would be. It's just beginning its curve, but the difference with Ether is there will only ever be a certain number of Bitcoin generated, but Ether are generated constantly, and they are also used up constantly. So there is not a circulation of currency like there would be with Federal Reserve notes. With Ether coins, they actually have a lifespan. But on the other hand, they are generated constantly as well because they have a different type of mining program. But once again, you get a Raspberry Pi or some such similar computer. And in that case, instead of having a regular CPU, you put a graphics card into the CPU slot, and that makes a type of mining computer called a GPU, which is a graphics processing unit. But instead of using a graphics processor for processing graphics, you use it for operating a more high-speed equation, like, for instance, running a Bitcoin mine or an Ethernet mine or some other mining software of other cryptocurrencies. And the advantage of that is that GPUs are more stable than central processing units, and they have a longer lifespan, and they operate at a higher, they operate more quickly. They can do more equations in a fixed amount of time than a CPU can. And for all of those reasons, a lot of people who operate mining software are actually changing out the central processing units for graphics cards, graphics processing units. And that's probably going to be my next step in my cryptocurrency mining adventures is to get one of these GPU mines happening for myself.
I was talking to one of our instructors on the phone last night, and that's what he's doing. When we come back, I'll tell you the price of one Ether coin. So, class, if you bought one Ethereum, and let me spell that for you, ETHEREUM. If you bought one of them on January 1st, 2017, this year, it would have been $8.07. Now, if you thought the Bitcoin numbers were staggering, hang on. So one of them on January 1st, 2017, $8.07. Today, right now, $362.67. 45 times. Staggering. So the next thing I did was I looked, went to the search engine again, I looked at images. Now, these images that I'm seeing on the search engine for Ethereum mining, I don't see anywhere near the scale of investment for these mines as I've seen for Bitcoin. And what I'm seeing is more something like what I would build. A Gorilla Rack, some really fast video cards, Radeon, NVIDIA, that kind of thing. And it's more doable for the individual, it seems to me. And I'm not looking at thousands and thousands and thousands of computers all in a room for mining Bitcoins. I'm sorry, for Ethereum, as I did with Bitcoin. So there are people who have maybe 1, 2, 3, 4, 12 computers all running together, 12 graphics cards, that kind of thing. So I would suggest that you look this up, class. Now, the big deal in all of this is the electricity, the electrical cost. So if you live in New York City where electricity is expensive, it's not as advantageous to someone who lives, let's say, in Missouri where you pay about 10 cents per kilowatt. And that's certainly not as advantageous as having your own solar array, as long as the sun's shining. So if you use a solar array, you need to have some kind of a backup to make sure that your system doesn't run out of power on those cloudy days. So there are a lot of things to consider. But I am really interested in pursuing this, Gwyneth. I really am.
Yep. I think that, like I said, if we had a stable power supply here, I would certainly be doing it at home. But like I say, you can. There's reputable companies out there that will. You've got to do your own research. But there are reputable companies out there that you can subcontract the mining to, and they will run your mining computers for you. And, of course, you pay them a small portion of whatever cryptocurrencies are produced, and that's how they earn their crust. But, of course, the majority of the coin goes to you. And it is unfortunate that... mostly for, government red tape type reasons, that BitClub is not operating in the United States. But, it's, you might, if you got an address, for instance, in Canada, like rented a place in Canada, if you were living in the United States, then that might be a way that you could possibly, do that and stay for some of the time in Canada. And but like I say, make your own inquiries as to the legal side of that, because I have no idea what the laws are, and I certainly wouldn't want to advise somebody to do something that they shouldn't be doing. But I know that often, when people need to do business interests outside of the United States, they often do, for instance, rent an office just north or just south of the border.
When we come back, I'll tell you what I found.
Yep.
When we come back, I'll tell you what I found about Ethereum mining. Interesting. I'm talking about the hardware. This is a fascinating subject to me. Gwyneth and I will be right back. Class, this is preparedness. I think you ought to do your own research. Everyone all set? Cocked? Locked? Here we go. Hour number 2 of USA Prepares. Gwyneth Isaacs is with us. And, you know, Gwyneth, I took some time during the commercial break at the top of the hour and the news break to look at Ethereum computers. And heck, it looks like you can buy a ready-to-go computer on eBay for $595 plus, you know, like about $25 shipping. And what are these? These aren't very much different from the computers that I used to build back in the 1990s and the 2000s. What I'm talking about is standard motherboard, standard memory, but the big difference is a really fast video card. That's what these computers have. So standard case, It would look like a, you know, nothing special tower type computer, motherboard, couple cooling fans, and you know, a video monitor, that kind of thing. That's what these computers are. And if you want, you can go to the internet and you can buy a Dell computer, and it's called a ETH, Ethereum mining computer. It's Dell T3600, and for $495, you know, with free shipping. These are computers that people have put together that they're using for mining. So I'm interested in this. I really am. I've got a bunch of old computers here that are, you know, Pentium class, and I think that I might just be able to put a fast video card in them and experiment with them, just see what happens. So that's my thought. Yeah,
we've got a couple of Dells here, and the marvelous thing about Dells, we have Dell laptops. Mm-hmm. The marvelous thing about them is that they just seem to keep going and going and going and going. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I'm very, very impressed with them as a computer manufacturer, because one of the Dells, gosh, we bought it, or I bought it shortly after I came here, and that was 5 years ago, and you know, it was about 5 years old then. It was a second-hand computer, so this particular Dell, and that's Dell E5500, okay, 5500, and, you know, it's about 10 years old, and it's still going strong, and it's running Windows 7. And like I say, the only thing about it is it's very, very hungry on the power supply, and you can't run it after about 6 p.m. at night. It sucks the battery dry. And so my boys are constantly saying, Mum, please don't plug your Dell in after about 6 p.m. And I say, because it's such a good computer. Mm-hmm. And you can do just about anything that you need to do with it. But like I say, it runs most of the modern software. And so I'm not surprised to hear that Dell is making Ethereum mining hardware. And if they're still making the same quality of computers that they were 10 years ago, I would say that that's probably going to be a good one to buy. But once again, do your own research.
Yes, I'm looking at 5 Dell monitors in front of me. And what I did was when I was building this studio, I went to eBay and I found some used computers and used monitors and keyboards and mice. And I bought a bunch of systems. And then I installed software that would let me run this broadcast from those used computers. So I have a feeling that a lot of the computers I've had for about 5 years here, or almost 5 years in the studio, and I have a feeling they're probably 5 years old when I bought them. So I did something very similar to what you did, but instead of being laptops or notebook computers, they are small tower computers. And all I do is blow them out with compressed air, and they pretty much keep running. I've only had a limited amount of failures, but nothing significant, because the computers were so inexpensive. I probably only paid $50 for each computer. When I bought that many. I think I bought 7 at one time.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. So great way to go. Now I'm not. Maybe I misspoke on what I found on eBay as far as Ethereum computers. I don't know if Dell is making them, but it's being sold as a Dell Ethereum. It's called ETH, Ethereum Mining Gaming Computer, Dell Precision T3600. So it may be that someone just took this computer and made it into a mining computer. I'm looking at that right now. I don't know. I don't know if it's a mining computer or whether someone just put a really fast video card in. This video card generates so much heat. It has 3 separate cooling fans on the video card. Seriously.
Yeah, and apparently that's normal. Mm-hmm. I have teenage children who are fond of their video gaming, and apparently that's quite normal for a gaming computer to have a sophisticated cooling system, especially if you're running it as a desktop. But you'll find even laptops with things like, there are people who actually do go out there and they buy laptops and they just have the laptops lined up and they do their cryptocurrency mining on their laptops, but they will have, a couple of dozen laptops lined up sitting on desks at home in a particular room, all hooked up into a network, in parallel mining their cryptocurrency. And, that's another way of doing it, but there's kind of advantages to that, in that, laptops tend to be a bit less expensive and they use a bit less electricity. But if you're going to do it that way, you might as well just go with the Raspberry Pi method, which uses probably as much electricity or even less electricity than a modern laptop, and takes up a lot less space, and is actually designed to run as a server, whereas a laptop is not really designed to run as a server. And you might run into problems trying to run it as such. But you would know more about that. You're more of the computer network systems expert than I am, but I'm just anticipating there might be problems there.
Well, you're right on the money. And, laptops typically cost more because they're smaller and they have less cooling capability. They're not designed to run 24 hours a day. The cooling is a big issue on laptops. The memory cooling, the CPU cooling, the video cooling, and even the motherboard cooling. But I'm looking at something really interesting here. It's on eBay, and this guy built a Ethereum mining rig, RIG. And what he's saying is that it looks like it's everything you need except keyboard and monitor. He's got uninterruptible power with it. It's got an aluminum frame. It's got Asus motherboards with memory. It's got a hard drive. It's got 8 RX 580 GPUs, graphics cards. And this thing is complete. It uses about 10 amps of electricity. And he shows a kilowatt meter measuring exactly how much power it uses. So it's using 1,243 watts of electricity.
That's not too bad.
Yeah, but 24 hours a day. 24 hours a day. Yeah. So in my neck of the woods,
you would still have to have cheap electrical costs.
Yeah, that'd be about 12.5 cents worth of electricity per hour. It doesn't sound like much, but it still is 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year. And this thing does come with an uninterruptible power supply, which is pretty big. And it looks like a great way to go. How much is it? $4,450. $4,450.
Mm-hmm.
And
so that's about the same price as a really, really, really good high-end desktop.
Yeah.
Which is around about $4,000 or $5,000.
So I'm really...
That's interesting that it sounds like what he's done there, okay, because the Asus motherboards, the Asus actually is a laptop. So it sounds like that he's pulled apart 8 Asus laptops. And Asus is another absolutely fantastic little laptop, okay? Especially the EEE PC, because I'll tell you a story. When we were getting chased by the WA police and the pedophile, who were basically working for the pedophile cartel in Western Australia, we had to dump our packs on a mountainside outside of Eildon in Victoria. And in one of my packs was an Asus laptop, an EEE PC, okay? And that laptop sat on a mountainside for 18 months in all weathers before the pack was finally recovered and the contents returned to me. And the EEE PC was still in the was still in the pack, and we got the charger for it, and we plugged it in, and we turned it on, and the screen was in a decayed state, but the screen was still operating, and that computer continued to function for about another 2 years, being used on a daily basis.
Yeah, Asus,
so like that's what he's done.
Yeah, Asus, ASUS. Right. Top-of-the-line Taiwanese computer manufacturer.
Top-of-the-line laptop.
Top-of-the-line.
Sounds like he's pulled the motherboards out of some Asus laptops and made them into an Ethereum mining rig.
Do you
Hold that thought. We're talking about computer hardware manufacturer Asus. Actual name is Asus Tech, ASUS. TEK, Computer Incorporated. It's a Taiwanese multinational computer and phone hardware and electronics company. And they make desktops, laptops, mobile phones, networking equipment, monitors, motherboards, graphics cards, optical storage, servers, workstations, tablets. They are a literally top-of-the-line manufacturer. Gwyneth, I've never mentioned this on the radio before, but when they started out in 1989, about 28 years ago, and we were one of their early customers. We bought their motherboards when we were manufacturing computers in Virginia. Why? Because we wanted a top-of-the-line computer motherboard, and that's what they made. Very, very few failures. It's a great company to work with.
Yep.
So that's Asus. And what I believe that we're talking about with this particular hardware platform is that they took an Asus mainboard or motherboard, and they put lots of graphics cards. They configured lots of graphics cards with it, and that's what they're doing. They've got a great power supply, and
yep.
The really important thing is that you've got plenty of cooling, and you've got a rock-solid, stable power supply, and you've got rock-solid computer hardware. And even the cables that interconnect these circuit boards, cards, motherboards, main boards, hard drive, power supply, they've got to be top of the line, very well constructed, good connectors. Because the last thing you want to do is almost get there and have your computer fail because of some lousy cable or some unstable power from the grid or whatever power source you're using. So I would keep that in mind.
Loose connection.
Absolutely.
Yep.
Absolutely.
I'll tell you one thing.
Mm-hmm.
When when the older Zeus, the one that was in the backpack, finally did fail, if a computer fails around our place, my sons do an autopsy on it.
Sure.
And they'll take it and they'll pull it apart, and there'll be bits of computer from one end of the room to the other, including screens, keyboards, and such like.
Yeah.
When they did the autopsy on the older Zeus, the one that was in the backpack, when it finally did fail, they found that the hard drive was actually soldered in, okay? They thought that they would be able to get the hard drive out and put it into another computer, but they found out that when it had been made in the first place, that the hard drive had actually been soldered into place. Mm-hmm. So I thought, that was really made to not fail, wasn't it?
I've never seen that in all the computers that I've built, and it's maybe close to 10,000. Literally, it was made for cross-country travel. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, the EEE-PC was made and advertised as a computer that you could put in your backpack and take cross-country. Well, that would be why then. You know, I've got a tip for our class. In the studio here, in my experience with computers, one of the things that causes them to fail is dust. And dust, there's a lot of air that moves through a computer because there's a fan that pulls in air from, let's say, the front of the computer and pushes it out the back. And that air runs through the computer and cools down the electronics. Well, there's so much air that goes through the computer that no matter how clean your house is or office, these computers get clogged with dust. And what I've found is that if you raise them off the floor, there will be less dust. So what I do is I have in the studio, I have the computer sitting on a raised surface. Let me look. About 2 feet off the floor. And they are in an area of the studio that not a low traffic area. As a matter of fact, they're in what you might call a cubby. And it's built into the wall. And it's like a little tiny room within the wall. And that's where the computers are. So the air goes in from the main room of the studio, and it gets exhausted out above the computers. And I recycle that heat in the wintertime. In the summertime, I close it off, and I exhaust that heat with another cooling fan that cools off that little room, if you will, and exhaust it to another part of the house, actually the garage. And it works great. So you want to keep your computers clean, especially if you're going to be mining.
And
so keep
cool.
That in. And cool, absolutely. We'll be right back. Beth, I'd like to talk a little bit about the quality of the equipment, just for a little bit more. I made a piece of test equipment for a friend of ours. He's also an instructor at USA Prepares, and they have a farmhouse, and the wiring is about 3 or 4 generations of wiring in this particular farmhouse, and different people have worked on it. And he was trying to figure out what's what. It's really complicated. It really is. I've seen it. And so they brought in a master electrician, and he walked away. He said he wants nothing to do with it. So I made a piece of test gear to test each one of these circuits. And it's very simple. It consists of a long piece, maybe 40 feet long, of wire. And I soldered alligator clips, insulated alligator clips on each one. And I decided to look at some of the pre-manufactured test alligator strips that I had in the automotive shop. They came from China many years ago at Radio Shack. And what they did was they just the Chinese factory stripped the wire, folded it over, and crimped an alligator clip end on it. What I'm saying is it's a lousy connection. The ones that I made were soldered. So the point of all this is the cables are not created equally. There are unshielded cables, which have just wires inside a jacket, plastic jacket. Then there are foil shielded, which is better, okay, to keep out electromagnetic radiation that these computers make. So it's just a thin strip of foil folded around the internal wires that are all insulated from each other. and it may have a drain wire that you would ground. Then better than that would be a braided shield around the wires. And even better than that is foil and braid and a drain wire. So what I'm saying is, and then of course you'd want them soldered if you can have them soldered. That's the way of looking at cables. And what am I talking about? I'm talking about video cables. I'm talking about USB cables. I'm talking about power supply cables. All of the cables that are within the computer, if possible, you would like them to be shielded, yeah, and soldered. Now, there's something that's called sealing current, SEALING, current. And what that means is the telephone company knows this. And we used to have landlines all over, and there are fewer and fewer landlines now. But the telephone companies knew that if they provided current 24 hours a day to the telephone sets attached at your house, if they provided current, it would seal the connection. And if the current stopped, the connection would corrode. So they applied sealing current to minimize the repairs. And it worked great. So what I'm saying is that applies to all kinds of electronics, sealing current. So keep that in mind. And that's why when you have computers and other devices that you keep running, they last. And if you shut them down, for a couple of months, sometimes they don't come back because the connections have corroded. Why? Because the sealing current was absent. Just a thought. So, Gwyneth, I really love this idea of mining. I'm all for it, and I want to get into it, and I'm going to. And we'll keep the class posted as to what we find out as we continue our journey about mining Ethereum, Bitcoin, Litecoin, and the other cryptocurrencies. But I like the most, what I found so far is I like mining the coins other than Bitcoin because the equipment necessary is a little less sophisticated, a little less expensive, and the barrier to entry to get involved is lower. Yeah. That's what I see.
And you'll find that with most other cryptocurrencies, you can use the same computer to mine a variety of different cryptocurrencies. Okay, so you could have the the mining software for maybe 2 or 3 or 4 different cryptocurrencies on hand, and you could load them onto your computer as you needed them, because it's the same hardware. It's only the software that varies. So that's another handy tip as well. The dogs are going off over there because the neighbours have just come home. In case anyone's wondering, why the pack has decided to act up. But that's good. It means we're never taken unawares. But the other thing that I was going to mention, oh gosh, what was it? It's just slipped my mind for a moment. I'll remember it in a second.
Okay. Well, I'm looking, class. If you want to see the kind of things we're talking about, just go to your favorite search engine, and what I typed in. Let's see. Let me go back to the top here. I typed in Ethereum computer, ETHEREUM space computer, and what I'm seeing is a bunch of video cards connected with cables or connected to what looks like a standard motherboard, and a power supply and some wires. Here's a guy that took a piece of plywood, and he made an end cap out of some 2x or 1x4 pieces of wood, and he took some shelving strips, and he's hanging his video cards with the shelving strips. I mean, this is truly homemade. He's got a power supply on one end, a power supply on the other end. Looks like he even may have a fan just sitting on the piece of plywood blowing across the computer. I mean, these are homemade setups, and of course, with a little bit of ingenuity that I know our class has, you can come up with an even better way of doing what these guys have done. So take a look at the images, and you'll find examples that you can do a better job from.
Yeah. And I'll tell you how Jeff Berwick puts it. You should get him on your show, the Dollar Vigilante. Okay? Mm-hmm. He's a really, really good guy. Like I said, I don't know him personally, but I love his stuff, and he's been his information has been a great deal of benefit to me. And he's a millionaire, but a millionaire of the type of oh gosh, you know, he calls himself an anarcho-capitalist, which means that he can see that the whole government system is basically a gigantic extortionate racket, to which I say a big fat amen. And that's how he structures his affairs, and he does podcasts to show other people as well how they can be anarcho-capitalists too, which is very handy. But how he puts it is this enables you to become your own central banker. And I think that says it in a nutshell. And when he said that, I'd been thinking along the same lines regarding cryptocurrencies myself. And when he said that, it really put it into a nutshell. You know what I mean? It really does enable you to be your own central banker.
Here's the problem. And I don't disagree with a single thing that you've said. But here's the problem. We have been, since birth, conned, convinced, persuaded, lied to by the system, by our school system. Even our parents didn't understand that we really don't need a bank. We could do business without a bank. We could do business without the government.
Yeah.
But we've been convinced that, no, we've got to have currency in order to buy things. And it's not true. It's not true. Not only is that not true, I can tell you that I've been able to buy things at less than the price that's been asked at chain stores. And I'm going to give you an example. A couple days ago, I had an alternator fail. And I made some test equipment to figure out exactly where the problem was. My battery kept going dead in my old Mercedes. Kept going dead, 1996 Mercedes. And I thought, let me test this. And I'll tell you what I did very quickly, class. I shut off the engine, shut off all the devices, and I hooked an amp meter between the negative battery cable. I inserted an amp meter there, and I was drawing about a half an ampere of current with everything off, key out of the ignition, and that was draining my battery. So then what I did was I tested each circuit where there was a fuse, and I put the amp meter across, digital amp meter, across every fuse that I pulled out to see which one of these fuses was powering the circuit that was stealing electricity, this phantom current that was being lost. And I couldn't find it. It was nowhere to be found. The only thing left was the alternator, which is not fused. So I disconnected the alternator, and the phantom load went away. So I went to buy an alternator, and it was $140 roughly. And I said, can you match an online internet price? And they did. I walked out with an alternator for $92. So not only can you buy things without currency, you can negotiate prices at stores. So I just wanted to share that with our class. But all you have to do is ask. Is that price firm?
That's right.
Can you do better? Do you have to take cash?
Support your local little guy.
If you can.
Support your local little guy.
If you can, yes.
The guy, if you still have the guy who operates his dusty hardware store in a little country town, okay, go and buy things off him. Go and support him instead of going and spending the money on fuel to go to your big chain store in the big town. If you still have a little guy with a little hardware store in a little town, go and buy the stuff off him, and you get home sooner. Maybe you pay a few dollars more, but you would have spent the money on fuel anyway.
Or you work out a deal with him and say, you know what, I'd like to shop here often and buy all the items that I need that you sell from you. What can you do to help me with price? Yeah, that's what I do. We'll be right back. Gwyneth Isaacs is with us, and Gwyneth, I really want to thank you for bringing to light the cryptocurrencies and the do-it-yourself component, even if you hire out the actual hardware or you hire out the location of that hardware to do your mining for you. So I went to the Ethereum community forum. It's called, let me spell it, ETHEREUM, community forum on the internet. And the question is, can I turn my current PC into a mining rig? And I'm sure a lot of our class had that question today. Can I use my computer as a mining rig? And I would suggest that you use a tower-type computer or desktop computer rather than a notebook, based on what I've learned so far. So here's the answer to that question. Can I turn my current PC into a mining rig? This guy says, I have a desktop PC which isn't getting much use lately. So I've been thinking of making it into a mining rig. And he talks about the CPU he has, and he talks about the video card that he has. And he says, or am I better off selling it and getting something better? Keep in mind the power costs are not an issue, meaning they can be neglected. That's not my thought. I think power should be a concern, but this guy doesn't seem to be concerned about it. And the answer is, sure. Pick the coin of your choice and get a coin address, either with a wallet or on an exchange. Add some mining software, and you're mining. And have some extra hard drive space on the rig. And he says what he's done, and I'm looking at a picture, let me describe it. He's got an older tower computer, and then he built a little rack for 6 more, well, it looks like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 more devices. And he's just hanging them on this wooden rack. And so he's got his tower computer that he wasn't using, and he has this wooden rack. He's got some cables on the floor. He's got a cooling fan that sometimes they're called box fans. His is round, and it's something that you might get at the dollar store for $20. He's blowing air to keep this homemade wooden rack with the video cards in it cool. And he's got another computer with the case open, just using it as a rack. So he's got 2 computer cases, one that's actually running his computer, a homemade rack, and a cannibalized old computer, using it as a rack, and a fan. And that's it. That's it. That's his entire rig. I don't see uninterruptible power. I'd like to add that. But what I'm saying is, this can be homemade to get started. Mm-hmm. And heck,
yep,
it's crazy not to do this. Yep.
And you could get started. If you had it from a Raspberry Pi, and just took your chances on your own power supply. If you wanted to buy a UPS, I guess that would cost between $200 and $300, right?
For a new one, for a new one, sure.
Yeah, and then let's say $60 for a Raspberry Pi. Well, you could get started on your cryptocurrency mining adventure for under $400 at an absolutely basic level. Mm-hmm. Yep. Mm-hmm. And
I'm looking
at to build it from there fairly quickly.
I'm looking at a UPS made by American Power Conversion, APC. And when I was in the banking industry, I called the engineers at APC when they first started their company, and I talked to them. I really liked them, and I believe that they've got some of the finest uninterruptible power equipment on the market. And here's a 1500 volt amp UPS, brand new, shipped $319.47. That's the size of the one that I bought used on eBay. I paid probably around $50. Here it is. Here it is, the one I bought. $49 plus shipping. No batteries, so you can put your own batteries in it. But heck, be real careful with those lead acid batteries. I know for a fact they can explode. I know that for a fact. And it's really dangerous. So
yeah,
I would use a sealed battery.
I think this is the end of the broadcast, isn't it?
Yeah, and I have a feeling that we've generated some interest. I know I'm going to get involved. Gwyneth, really, thanks so much for being with us today.